What's shakin' bacons? Today we're continuing with our Things That Terrify Me, Part 3. It is a continuation of our discussion about the Fermi Paradox. If you have not yet seen my first video on the Fermi Paradox, make sure you watch that before you watch this one so you have proper context. I also recommend watching the first Things That Terrify Me segment about the Great Filter, because that one ties in with this as well. In this one, I want to talk about explanations for the Fermi Paradox, theories people have about it, possible responses to it, and these are all pretty much, I think, the scariest things, so this is the most terrifying. There are lots of explanations for the Fermi Paradox, and some of them range from the ridiculous, the aliens are here, man! They're gonna take over, man! To actual, normal, plausible, and straightforward theories, which are what we're actually going to talk about today, not the fact that the government might be hiding it all from us, or that they're going to take over, at least the aliens are. The first logical explanation is that we are alone, and that there are no higher civilizations in existence. We are literally just it. And that's it. Probability does suggest, however, that if there are millions of other civilizations in the galaxies and there are thousands in our own galaxy, it would stand to reason that at least one of them would be making some kind of noise and we would notice it. But nope, there ain't nothing. There's been nothing. And if there are no higher civilizations in existence, and we do happen to be the first of them, which again is incredibly egotistical in my personal opinion, that would mean we're the progenitors. We would be like the Leviathans that make the Reapers in Mass Effect. We are the precursors in Subnautica. Like, that's us. Everything about this entire explanation, which is that we are alone, absolutely just scares the pants off me. As humans, we are incredibly flawed. Like, that is not debatable. It's just how it is. And, you know, as that song goes, I'm only human after all, don't put the blame on me. So to think that we are somehow in our own ego alone, like alone in the universe, and it's all on us, and we're first with all of the pressure that that entails, that terrifies me. I mean, think about it. It's equally disturbing to think that there are far superior beings and civilizations than us out there somewhere. But think about, what if we're the first and right now we're alone? So the fact that there's either a lot that we haven't seen yet, or that there's nothing but us on this tiny chunk of rock floating in space is terrifying to me. And being the first, if we are the first and if we are alone, and being the civilization that sets the stage for everything else, that's a lot of pressure, and that is a really scary thought. And to be quite frank, I think currently we're failing at it because we have a lot of problems. We can't even seem to accelerate our thinking beyond Earth, let alone deal with the problems on Earth, let alone be the people that set the example for civilizations down the road. I mean, the thought is just incredible to me. And in a lot of ways, it reminds me of Interstellar when, spoilers for Interstellar, which you should also see, by the way, that movie's amazing, when it's revealed that the people communicating with gravity and the people saving Murphy and that whole family are humans in the future that are ensuring their own survival. Like, that's crazy. Like, we might someday get there, but right now we are so stuck in our own little heads and our small scale thinking and our short-term thinking that it's scary to think if we're alone. First of all, the idea that we're alone is scary, but it's also scary to think that it's on us because we ain't close to being there yet.
You know what I'm saying?
Now, the second explanation for the Fermi Paradox that is very popular is that we may not just have heard from other civilizations because they are so far away. So far away. And our scientists have decided we live in what is called the backwater part of the galaxy. We're relatively like on the fringes. We're not like in the middle of things. It's possible that we are either missing signals from other civilizations or they're just not coming out to this part of the galaxy. Like, we live in the back alley corner of like the countryside somewhere where it's like 5 hours to the closest airport and nobody's coming near us. We're not a tourist destination. Nobody cares enough about us yet because we're not developed enough. So we're just not hearing anything, or they just don't care enough to come out here. And in that case, we may just need to get to a certain point on our planet before we are deemed civilized enough to have someone contact us, maybe. Or they could be avoiding us on purpose. So on the opposite side of the whole egotistical thing and the anthropocentric school of thought, people have also thought maybe we just aren't hearing from other civilizations because they just think we're too darn awful the way that we've treated each other on our planet and the things that we've gotten into and like the war crimes we've had and the problems we have. And maybe their civilizations are like, no thank you. Let them fester on their own. We also might not have heard from other civilizations because they may just be observing us and watching how we evolve or how we turn out, just like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. It could be as simple as that. You know, if there are other civilizations, to find out that we would be deemed so inconsequential or like far removed from anywhere of note or from anything that would possibly care about us, it could be a blessing in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of like, oh man, like we're not even like coping to be recognized. So that's the second explanation. The third explanation is where we start getting into some really freaky territory, which is predator civilizations. That is where any civilization that puts themselves out there and makes any noise is targeted by super predator civilizations like the Borg that don't want competition, or they want to use people as fuel, or they power themselves off of other civilizations, and they don't want any competition and they don't want anybody else screwing up the natural order of things where they are on top. It's just like, in addition to the Borg, it'd be like the Reapers in Mass Effect. They are the perfect example of this idea because they return cyclically to wipe out developing civilizations as those civilizations reach what they deem to be a crucial threat threshold, if you will. And it's time for them to be wiped out and harvested and used to power the next generation, the next thousands of years, until they come back and wipe everyone out again to perpetuate their own survival. And this concept could also potentially mean that there is only one super intelligent civilization that exists and that it's incredibly predatory. That's scary because they are just wiping everyone out, and that means that we might be on that list. Explanation 4 is the absolute worst. And this is where it's too dangerous to make any sounds or put ourselves out there, and we're idiots for doing so. And we're not hearing anything because it's too dangerous for anyone to make a noise. And this is where my true terror for this comes in, and this is also why I keep mentioning Cixin Liu's trilogy with the Dark Forest, in Remembrance of Earth's Past, or whatever the huge long title is. This is where that comes into play, because that entire series is based on that concept of the fact that it is too dangerous to make sounds and put ourselves out there. In this theory, it is just way too dangerous to communicate or to project signals or noise or attempt to make contact with other civilizations due to the limited amount of matter and resources in the universe, because we are all competitors. If an intelligent civilization begins to expand and grow, like using the von Neumann probes, the von Neumann probes that I've talked about before, that civilization, as it colonizes and spreads itself exponentially forward like roots of a tree system, is like a virus in the universe. And it's colonizing and touching and infecting everything that it encounters with its presence. And while that civilization may not see itself as an infection, that doesn't necessarily mean that the potential future civilizations it's taking resources from, or the habitats it's disrupting, or other civilizations that are in those galaxies that start to feel threatened do not see them as a virus. Because the problem is, the universe has a very finite amount of matter. You can't create matter. It's one of the basic rules of physics. You can only use what currently exists, right? And if one civilization is consuming all of the matter, there is not enough energy material for another civilization to grow to that level and then evolve and become stronger and continue its own evolution, if you will. And so you get exterminated. So the thinking is, we're not hearing anything because it's too dangerous to communicate, because once we communicate, another civilization that recognizes that we have advanced this far can find out where we're broadcasting from and wipe us out as a competitor. This one differs from explanation 3 because there's not one super intelligent predator civilization. It is that we are all pitted against every other civilization that exists out there. And that is scary because it's literally like a Mexican standoff where it's us against literally every other thing, and it's every other thing against every other thing and us, which is really intense to think about. And what's scarier about this is that as humans, we've just been blasting into the universe for decades, like decades. Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan have both warned against doing this, and Carl Sagan is very optimistic. Well, he was very optimistic in terms of thinking that life in other areas would probably be more benevolent than antagonistic. But even he called broadcasting our presence and information about us and where we are deeply unwise and immature. So if you have the most optimistic guy saying this is a bad idea, that's a really bad idea. If we don't communicate with other civilizations and we haven't heard anything from them, the idea is that if we're all in competition against each other, we are all living in darkness, afraid to light that beacon. And that's where the dark forest precept comes in. You are in a dark forest, and as soon as you light that little fire, the hunters around you can see you and find you immediately. And I have chills because this freaks me out so much. It freaks me out so much. If you like this stuff, and that's why I find Cixin Liu's trilogy terrifying. You should also read. There's a creepypasta story that I think originated on Reddit from the user. I wrote it down. Bank Bartlett, and it's called Radio Silence. And if anyone's interested, maybe I'll do a reading of this, like an ASMR kind of whispery reading of Radio Silence. That's a really good way of hammering home how dangerous this kind of atmosphere in the universe could be. So that to me is absolutely terrifying. In fact, I think there's plenty more explanations, but I think all of these are really scary things to contemplate. I don't think that we're the only intelligent civilization out there. I think that the universe is just way too big, matter is just way too old, and there's just way too many possibilities and probabilities for something else to not be there somewhere, no matter how far away that might be. But that's scary because that either means, and this is where the Great Filter ties in, that we are either yet to come to the Great Filter, which, if it's a naturally occurring thing, could mean our annihilation. Or if the Great Filter is another civilization, it means that some vast unknown presence is out there lurking in the darkness. And if we reveal ourselves, we could just be snuffed out. Or maybe we're all in the Matrix. Wake up, Bacons, they're coming for us! So anyway, that concludes the Fermi Paradox conversation. I highly recommend reading Cixin Liu's series if you have not yet read it. I will have a link in the description box below to the series on Amazon if you want to just even look at it or check it out. And then you can look it up into your local library. If you want to buy it, you can buy it. Oh man, now I kind of want to reread it. But I already reread it this year. I can't always just reread the same stuff over and over again. Although I say that, and I'm also currently rereading for like the millionth time Anne McCaffrey's Brain and Brawn Ships series. Oh, I love Anne McCaffrey. I digress. Anyway, what explanation do you personally subscribe to for the Fermi Paradox? Why don't you think we've heard anything? Why do you think it's been so quiet? Do you think it's a government cover-up? Do you think that it's because it's just too dangerous to say anything? Do you think we're the first? Because that is really scary to contemplate. I hope you're all doing really well. And as usual, if you really enjoyed these kinds of topics and videos, make sure you give me a thumbs up. It really helps out because then I know that you guys like this and you want to see more of this kind of content. And in the meantime, I will catch you later.